Hello, my friends. I am so happy you're here today. I'm just going to preface this. This is going to be one of those episodes, conversations that you listen to that make you kind of mad. And it should make you mad because the way that Taylor was treated and delivered information should make you sick to your stomach. Let me also say hi, I'm Katie. Welcome to the podcast. I don't normally start off like this, but this was one of those conversations where I just had to have her repeat it to me again to make sure I was understanding correctly. And that's why sharing these episodes and listening to family stories and the parent perspective is so essential to delivering better healthcare, delivering better information, helping families actually navigate the complexities of healthcare. Because when you listen to the scenario that she was put in, when she learned about what was going on with the baby in her belly at her 20-week anatomy scan, the conversation that happened in a closet, y'all, I'm not even kidding. This conversation happened in a closet. It's going to make you mad, and I'm glad that it does, because I want you to share her story, not only with other parents so that they feel less alone, but with care team members who are directly talking with families. It is so essential that we learn how to communicate in a way that is not only efficient, but is also completely empathetic or sympathetic to families and what they're experiencing. So with that said, Taylor is my new friend. She just lives right down the road from me in Dripping Springs is where I live, and she's down the road from me. And so we'll absolutely be getting coffee, talking with her and learning about her amazing family, her son who has charge syndrome. She reached out and said, hey, you haven't had a charge family yet, so let's get a charge family on. Absolutely. She's going to be one of those people that you're like, Katie, you should podcast with her more. And don't worry, I feel like we only touched the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this very long introduction. I'm so glad that you're here, that you're learning more from parent experiences and you're sharing their incredible stories so that other families feel less alone, and so that as healthcare providers, we do better. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Awesome, Taylor. Well, I'm so excited to chat with you, Taylor, because number one, I have the same last name as your first name, so clearly we're related. Yep. And then secondly, you reached out when we haven't had a charge family yet. And yep. So I'm really honored and just, eager to learn about your experience. But I would first love to learn just about you and who you are, and tell us a little bit about you and your family and what it's like to live in your life.
Yes. So my name is Taylor and our last name is Happley. No, I'm not always the happiest person or happiest person.
Such a disclosure you have to do.
Married into that last one. It works for our son, though, and our daughter, who are very happy and bubbly. My husband and I met over 10 years ago now. We got married back in 2018, and we got pregnant with our first daughter, 2019. Ended up having her right before the pandemic hit. So she was a late February baby. So we were already like, wow, this is really rough being new parents. And then we were hit again with the medical diagnosis of our son midway through our pregnancy. So actually, that's not true. We didn't know about Jack until I'm just all over the place. I'm sorry. But yeah, so we have a 4 and a 2.5-year-old, and we love them both. They're both very different personalities, but strong personalities. And we're just kind of riding this wave with them.
Yeah. And I already know about you that you're fashionable, because I can see, number one, you look so great. Your hair and your makeup are done. You have a beautiful background of Jack's little nook that you were explaining to me.
Yes.
So what was life like before you had kids for you?
I was very go, go, go. I am a homebody, but I love being out. I love hanging out with friends. I love socializing. And then when I got pregnant, I was like, wow, this is going to be so fun to have a baby, take them out into the world, get to experience life with them, huge Disney goer. And then with Charlie, the pandemic again happened. And then with Jack, we hit this place of so much uncertainty and having to relearn what and how we were capable of doing things just to keep him safe and our daughter safe,
Yeah.
and balancing out all the things. So there was a period of time where I didn't know who I was and I didn't recognize myself. And I remember my mom came into town. She doesn't live in Texas. And she just took me shopping. And I remember I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't bought anything for myself, in the last 6 months or however long it had been. And I just remember being like, do I like these? Do I not? And so it's been a learning curve, just learning about my kids, right, as a new mother and who I am as a mom, but also learning how to balance everything we have going on with Jack and our family.
Oh, it's so true. Just you lose yourself a little bit.
Yes.
Maybe some people don't. I certainly did. And it's even like a little bit uncomfortable when you start feeling back into your skin because you don't necessarily recognize the person that you are.
Yes, very much so. Even just
Well,
hormonal changes, you're pregnant, then you're not pregnant, then you're postpartum in the NICU, then you're a new mom at home with this baby that doesn't come with instructions. And you're like,
yeah.
how do we do this?
How do we do this?
Yes.
Um, well, talk a little bit kind of about the beginning of your story with Jack and finding out that something was going on with him.
Yeah. So we were really excited. We had actually gone through almost our entire pregnancy without knowing anything was wrong until the anatomy scan. And at the anatomy scan, and I'm even talking, we had done the genetic blood work, we had done our NT scan, we had done regular scans, we had done blood work. All of it was normal and low risk. So the only thing that we did notice that happened with Jack, I was going in for blood work as a newly pregnant mother, and my blood work kept coming up negative or not high enough on HCG to be considered pregnant. So that was the only weird thing or any abnormal thing. The week of Jack's anatomy scan, I kept telling my husband, I was like, I feel really full. And I would like push down on the top of my stomach, which was massive already at being 20 weeks. And I just thought like, oh, it's second baby. And I just kept telling him, I feel full. I don't know how I'm going to go through a pregnancy this way. Well, we went to the anatomy scan. I think it was like the next day or 2 days later. And we get through the scan and, they're not reading anything. They're not telling you anything. And she's just being very quiet and not as bubbly as she was from the beginning of the scan. And she
Mm.
goes, okay, well, the doctor will be in with you. So we kind of dial back and we're like, all right, well, they're probably just going to say like, we don't know, but we just assume the doctor just has to go through everything as it happened with Charlie at our anatomy scan. Our OB sends all of their anatomy scans to a high risk office already, just whether or not you're having a typical pregnancy or not. So we were already in a high risk office, and the doctor comes in and she's like, we have some things to talk about. And my husband and I were both like, okay, well, what is it? And she starts with his thumb, and we've now since lovingly called it and miss it his gummy thummy, and my daughter named it that, but he was polydactyl. And it was only on one hand, but we were like, okay, well, he has an extra thumb, like 3 thumbs up, whatever, cool, we'll get over that. And then she starts in with, but there's something a little bit more serious. It's not anything to worry about now, but you will now be monitored. And we're like, okay. And it was just a heart condition. He has something called a right aortic arch. And I always hate saying that because I always butcher it. I don't know why after all these years. There were no signs or symptoms that anything was wrong with his heart other than that. My husband and I left that day feeling pretty defeated, but we had not publicly announced yet that we were pregnant. We hadn't done the social media announcement yet or anything. And that was our goal, was to go to the anatomy scan and then to announce with a baby bun and say like, hey, another bun in the oven. So my husband was like, let's not think about it. We'll just go get this bun and we'll do the announcement. So we did that. And a few weeks later, the next scan came, and then the next scan came. And slowly our scans started being, low risk to, hey, we see a little bit more, or hey, your amnio fluid's a little high. Or there was one scan in particular, they kept looking at his head, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why they were looking. And this was kind of the one that broke us. They've been really looking at a scan and really looking down here. And they left us in the room for a long time alone. And then they came back and said, we need to move you. So I just assumed we were going to like a waiting room or another room. They brought us to a physical broom closet. It was an actual broom closet with equipment in the corner and a mop. And there was one chair desk thing that I sat in, but like my belly was like hitting it and everything. And my husband just kind of like sat in this other chair, and there was no way to face the door or like turn. So we're in this broom closet with these chairs, and it's COVID. So you have a mask on and you're like, what is going on? And the doctor opens the door. Yep. She has a mask on and leaves the door open, which I now look back knowing all my, medical history and what should go on and what shouldn't go on in privacy, left the door open and said, we have some things to talk about. And she starts going into how she knew something was wrong with Jack, but she couldn't pinpoint what it was. And, we're going through the blood work, and she had assumed that he had a condition called DeGeorge, and we now know he does not. But she kept bringing up DeGeorge and kept saying this and that. And we asked her specifically what she was seeing, and she would not tell us. She kept saying she couldn't put it into words what she was seeing. And I said, well, do you see facial markers? What are you seeing physically that's more than what you've been telling us about? And I said, is it his brain? And she then said, well, yes, we did see more fluid on his brain. We saw fluid on his brain, and your amnio levels are higher. So it was just that kind of defeat. And she then asked a very dark question. Maybe this is a trigger post, but she asked us if we wanted to weigh our options and if we would like an abortion to terminate. And I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't process at that moment. And my husband just very quickly, I remember he shut it down. He goes, what are you talking about? This is our son. And there's nothing heroic about that. There's nothing, excuse me while I collect myself for a second. There's nothing that we did that was different than anyone else. And anyone else in our shoes could have picked any decision. But this was our son. And we were well into our 20s at this point, well into our 30s. And we knew that this boy, whoever he was going to be our boy. So we left that day. And after that day, we noticed that the tone kind of changed within our appointments. So instead of us, receiving happy news at these appointments, if there was anything wrong, they wouldn't tell us. And it got very weird. And we always speculated there was something more because there was a very specific area right in here, right in his esophagus, right in his neck, they always seemed to focus on. It was like they'd look at his heart, they'd look at his neck, and then they'd go to his brain. They didn't really, monitor too closely on growth at that point because we noticed he wasn't growing very quickly. They did do a growth, right before you're born. They did do one of those, and they estimated him to be closer to my daughter's size, which is like an 8-pound baby. And I'm 5'0". So I'm like, wow, this is going to be a massive baby. And that didn't happen. So when the tone changed, we started to do our own research. We went to a neonatologist, cardiologist, and we got scans there and we started monitoring there. We then started joining support groups for DeGeorge, even though I knew that's not what he had. I started, desperately joining the support groups to try to figure out and navigate what that future might look like. And then one of the conditions of DeGeorge, and I'm not a DeGeorge expert, obviously, but one of the conditions is they call it complete or total DeGeorge, and you are born with little to no thymus and extreme immune system issues. And when we started looking down that path, I noticed there's something called a thymus, and you can have, T cells and B cells, and your thymus is kind of controlling all of that and creating this immune system for you. And I walked in, it was like my 36-week scan, and I asked them to look for a thymus. And I'm trying to condense this all down so we get there, right? But I'm
I'm right there with you. Right here.
Yeah. So they're looking for it and they can't find it. So then the doctor comes in, and I just remember she looked at me and she goes, well, we can't find it. And I said, all right, well, that's not the end all be all. And we left. And I called my sister-in-law, who's a PA, and my husband was driving. I was on speaker with my sister-in-law, and I was Googling syndromes with little to no thymus. I didn't know what I was going to find, but only 3 things popped up. One was DeGeorge, and I knew in my gut, in my mom heart, that it was not DeGeorge. One was something called SCID or bubble boy syndrome, and that can be, unrelated to anything, but it didn't seem likely because Jack had so many other little things going on. And then the last one was charge syndrome. And I just remember there was this little boy's face, and I looked at him and I just remember looking at his scans, my son's scans in the video that we had of him. And I just remember being like, it's church syndrome. And I'm on the phone with my sister-in-law. I'm talking to my husband driving. My husband's getting defensive. He doesn't want to diagnose. We've already been
Yeah.
down this emotional roller coaster. And my sister-in-law, I'm just, at this point, I don't remember if I was crying or not, but I just remember knowing and feeling very overwhelmed, knowing that I knew who Jack was at this point. And he had a name. He had a name the whole time. The middle name's a little iffy, but he did have a name. And that's where we just kind of took off on our journey with Jack. So, it was a heavy, heavy pregnancy. And that just kind of started to prepare us for our future with Jack.
Oh my goodness. I'm just thinking about like you going through that whole pregnancy and
It
the
was
way
hard.
that you were let down by like the healthcare system as a whole and
Mhm.
people. And it stinks. And I'm so grateful for people like you who are coming to speak out about it so that hopefully change can happen, but that also other families know that you can navigate even like the worst experiences in healthcare and being told
Oh,
in
yeah.
a broom closet, do you want to end your pregnancy? Like, goodness, but that
Yes.
you can get to the point where you're at now. And you're
Yeah.
so
And it's still hard.
educated, you're so eloquent, and I can't imagine how hard it is, but you're here and so is Jack.
Yes, he's here and he's thriving. It's touch and go. I always say, and I have a mom group we all have babies with Church syndrome. They're toddlers now. They're all older, but we always talk about the dark days. We always talk
Mm.
about that first year, and unfortunately, we're not all still here. Some of us are not, and that's also one of the things that we've watched and navigated during this role as being Jack's parents, is also connecting with families who don't always have the same outcome that we do. So we definitely push for Jack. We advocate for Jack, and we have a strong. I hate to say this, but we have a strong mistrust in a lot of Jack's care team. But then there are some doctors that we just, every word they say we believe on and we hang on. Um,
Yeah.
and that's just, I think that's part of us.
Mm. I'm thinking about and wondering about because you clearly had such a strong bond to Jack even before he was
Yeah.
born. You had these like internal feelings. Can you talk a little bit about after he was born and one of the
Yeah.
first memories where you were like, I'm his mom, he's here. And
Yeah.
did it
Um,
come right after he was born? Did it take some time?
no. So we had a really traumatic birth story, and I don't like to dig into all of that, but we were basically cleared by that same high risk doctor to deliver at a hospital that did not have a NICU. They did not have, even, they called them like baby caregivers, but they did not have anyone equipped to do anything other than put a cannula on a baby and monitor stats. And we got lucky when one nurse kind of came in. Jack was not feeding. He had a wet kind of breathing pattern to him. And they just kept taking a bulb and sectioning him, and, the green ones, the blue ones. And we couldn't
Yeah.
figure out what was going on with Jack. And we got really lucky. There was a nurse, and I always think about him because I still, like, I can picture his face. And I remember him just being like, I called the neonatologist for you and we're preparing it, and
Yeah.
um, I had a really long delivery and they took Jack away to try to get him to feed. And I'd never offered formula a day in my life with my daughter. But with Jack, I was like, just get him calm, because when he was getting worked up, the secretion management was not there. And they never brought him back to our room. And that's another story, but they never brought him back to our room. And by the time I saw him again, he was preparing for transfer to go to a level 4 NICU. So the highest NICU level you can have, for surgery. And I was like, surgery, surgery. I wasn't comprehending what they were talking about.
Yeah.
I had epidural legs still. So they wheeled me over to this baby room, and he was sitting in not an isolette, but just because he's a term baby, he's sitting in just a bed. And I remember looking at him, and we were only there a few minutes. And I just remember stroking his little finger and looking at his ears because he has part of charges having different ears. And I remember just being like, I knew it was you all along, buddy.
Mm.
And they weren't really talking about much. They were talking over us and to us, but not really directly asking questions or like asking permission. You know, my husband signing paperwork because I'm just out of it.
Right.
And I remember the baby transfer team came in, the NICU transfer team came in, and the lady that was transferring Jack looked at me and they're, you know, plugging him into all these different monitors and she's talking softly to me. And I just remember thinking, like, isn't this an emergency? Like, you're taking him by ambulance. And she looked at me and goes, did you guys get a picture yet? And I was like, why are we taking a picture in this moment?
Yeah.
And she was like, look, mom, you're going to want this picture. Do you want the picture? And they have him in this baby bed and he's strapped up to so many monitors. I've never seen this, you know, out of a hospital setting in my life, but
Right.
they have him on all these monitors and they have a reproval down his throat to make sure he can breathe and he's not suffocating and choking on his own secretions. And I'm like, I don't, and she's like, pull your mask down. And it's height of COVID policies. And
Yeah.
I'm like, am I allowed to pull my mask down? So we just take these stupid photos and I'm just like grinning, but not, and you can just see the sadness. But that was also a
Right.
moment that I was like, we need to find something normal in all of this gray situation. And so that was one moment. And then the next was the day that we were doing surgery. My husband knew I was just defeated. He had to explain to me the night before what the surgery was because the entire time I kept thinking it was for his heart. My brain was protecting me through all the
Right.
trauma. And my husband had to explain, you know, it's his esophagus and his stomach not connected. And I was like, I sat on the phone for an hour and a half with the surgeon and I still don't know what you're saying to me. My husband made it clear to the NICU team that I wanted to hold Jack before because we couldn't hold him when he was down. He was too fragile. They had him sedated so he wouldn't move to just basically keep him alive. And I remember they made it a point to not tell me they were letting me hold him, but they said, we need to change his bed linens. And I was like, bed linens? Like, aren't we taking him to surgery? And I'm not understanding, but I just have like this picture and I have Jack in my two hands and I'm just holding him, you know, and trying to kiss him and I'm crying and it was a lot, but
Oh,
yeah, that was one of our moments too
yeah.
with him.
How do you, I've worked in a NICU before and I feel there are appropriate times to read the room and say, would you like a picture? Is this an okay time? Are you happy you have those pictures? Or
Um,
what is the feeling
I
looking maybe happy isn't the word, but what do you feel looking back at them?
I can feel it took me a long time to look at a lot of them. And I
Yeah.
still don't look at all of them. And I do look at some of them. Like I look through some of his milestones being met. Like, hey, he got off the vent. Hey, this was the day that we tried milk, but it didn't work. So we went to an NG. He got his first milk belly. You know, here's the day we got off TPN because he was on TPN and lipids for the first couple weeks of his life because he couldn't eat. You know, I try to look at some of those in a very positive light. I've always shared with anyone following along with Jack's story, like I'm not your roses and rainbows all the time. I'm going to be
Right.
the positive, the negative, and all the in between because it's important to share that this isn't an easy situation. There's nothing easy about having a
Yeah.
complex child. And I made friends in there too. And so, you know, we would share like snippets and days of our life and just connecting
Right.
with other moms. And I share Jack too. And I have these photos to share because it helps other people in those new diagnostic periods of time, right? And I've had people message me, and it's not just one or two people, it's dozens message
Mm.
me and thank me for sharing him because it led them to find more about their son and give them
Wow.
hope in a gray area in their life, in a dark period of their life. You know, whether they're still in the NICU or they're fresh out of the NICU, or maybe they were lucky and they skipped the NICU, but now there's something else and we're dialing it back. So I wouldn't say I look at them often, but if they pop up on my Apple swipe, I'll look at
Yeah.
them. Or,
Yeah.
you know, around his birthday, they always get looked at. or
Yeah.
when I'm reminding myself just how far he's come, I would
How
keep
far you've
those.
come. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting now how often just people take pictures of everything, right? Of every moment of,
Yeah.
walking down the street, you see something happen, you take a picture. So it does happen more often, but I find it really interesting that such a part of that story of transporting or transferring to another hospital was that moment where you were asked to take a picture, and it's probably a little bit awkward to know what to do.
Yeah, and I mean, he was stable at that point, but I think they knew, I think the transfer team knew that once we got to the NICU, it was going to change drastically. And it did. It did.
Mm, mm,
The next time I saw my baby after that, because I was still a patient, they transferred me as a patient because they were sister hospitals under the same umbrella. And we had to weigh options there too. So I was technically a patient when I was transferred. And the next time I saw my baby, they were asking me and shoving a pump in my face and saying, if you want breast milk, you better breast pump. There was a just flurry of people around Jack. And he was a term
okay.
baby. So I'm looking at all these isolates around, and he looks massive, even though he was this itty bitty baby, barely 6 pounds. And the neonatologist had been on for a couple days, the poor thing, because then I come in and I'm like this loud mom. But she was trying to talk me through all their findings. And I just remember being so in a state of shock that I am still thankful that I took those photos, even if
Mm.
I may never post them. A
Yeah, but
day
they're
in my life,
yours.
I have them. Yes. And Jack will
Mm,
have them.
yeah. When you wrote to me in the form at the beginning, I was really inspired by the way you look at Jack's relationship with his sister.
Oh, yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about that and what it means to her to be, because she's the big sister, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
To be the
We
big
have
sister
I have
to
an
Jack.
older, I have a stepdaughter too, but she's out of the house. She's in school now.
Yeah.
But Jack and Charlie have always been there together. And Charlie had to grow up really quick. I did 2 under 2. She was less than 21 months when I had Jack. And then we had a 73-day NICU stay. And they've done study on study with these kids with charge syndrome and other genetic syndromes, and they do so well with siblings. So I always joke because there's like this trend going around, and people are like, oh, see how the siblings of, disabled children treat their sibling, and they're like nicing them and, feeding them and loving on them. And my kids are just like constantly fighting or arguing or just like battling it out over this littlest things, but you're just like, all right. And that's always just been the beat of their relationship. They have very strong personalities, but man, that girl is wildly protective of Jack in all things Jack.
Mhm.
And I remember the first time that she noticed something was different. We had brought Jack home and she was asking questions. She's under 2 at this point, so it's little toddler questions, but it was like, what
Yeah.
is that in Bubba's nose? He came home on a cannula. It was, what is that on his foot? We had a pulse oximeter. What is that in his belly? Why do some babies eat with a bottle and he eats with a tube? And I wasn't sure if she was grasping what was going on until she started asking for like a doll with a tube. So we got her a doll and a baby pump with a tube. Then we were at the park one day and Jack was in a stroller and we were feeding him and like kids were watching. And Charlie just looks at the other little kids and like gets in the middle of them and she goes, he eats with a tube. He's a tubey baby. And it was like, oh, okay. And then, it's so funny because all these therapists come to our home and she started just associating them with being friends. But she'll be like, is the therapist or the nurse coming? Because now we have a nurse after, we started with the nurse about a year ago too. But she is very protective of him. He picks up on things and learns quickly through her too. So if he
Mm.
sees her do something, he wants to do it. But then he also will sit there and egg her on. So if he knows that she's in a chilling out moment playing with a very specific toy, suddenly that
He
toy
wants
is the
it.
only toy that exists. Yeah. And it could be like a plastic bag or a paper plate and they still will fight it out. Right. But I think that their relationship is one of the stronger sibling relationships I've ever watched. And I really, I fight and struggle sometimes with giving Charlie glass child syndrome. And I struggle with that balance between being a mom to both of them, but then that fine line between being a mom and a caregiver to Jack. And so sometimes that takes hold of what happens with Charlie and independent time with Charlie. So, we're really working on trying to implement more time structure for Charlie and bringing her back in ways that maybe she's missed out on in the last couple of years.
Mm. And the truth is, even when you have another caregiver there or a nurse or a therapist, you're still
Mhm.
the ultimate caregiver. You really don't get those
Yeah.
quote unquote breaks. Like it is on
Yes.
you and your husband. And that's a lot to have to carry with you in supporting two kids, yourself, your marriage, and navigating just other life challenges that don't stop just because you have a medically complex child.
Yes. Yes. They don't. And I think that's, being a mom all the time is hard, right? Being any mom is extremely difficult and taxing, mentally and physically. But then you throw in all the hoops with the medical kiddo, and you're kind of just in a state of shock all the time, of fight or
Mm.
flight is the way I say it. I'm surviving, maybe not always thriving, and it comes and
Yes.
goes. But yes.
I've recently gotten into the addiction, which is Peloton, and
Oh
there's
yeah,
a podcast called "Is It a Cult?" and I guess they did one on Peloton. Peloton, is it a cult?
I believe that.
And my husband said the answer was it's a cult, but it's a good cult.
Yeah, no, it's a healthy addiction.
It's a healthy addiction. Oh my gosh, what was I getting with this point? Oh, but they always say that moving forward is a pace, no matter how slow you go, you get one thing done at a time. You just keep on pushing. You're not always thriving, you're surviving though, and you're getting through each minute of the day.
Yes,
And you talked a lot about being a social person kind of at the beginning and then immediately looking for support groups, having your group text of moms who are going through it. Would you say that's one of the bigger things that have supported you during this time of being Jack's
absolutely.
mom?
Yeah, we don't have, well, okay, we don't not have family in the area. We have family a little further away from us, and we have
Okay.
friends that are close to us. But Jack's a really intimidating kiddo on paper. If you look at him too close, you're like, oh my gosh, did I get him sick? He can be intimidating, even though he's doing so well and he's getting older. So that mom group has been one of my, really strong support systems. We also in the church community have a major Facebook group that we all work under with the foundation. The foundation was a huge piece and part of our life when we first got diagnosed to know what else to look for. There are now, as of this year, there are two hospitals that specialize in Church syndrome. They have a Church syndrome clinic set up. We reached when Jack was in the NICU still, we went and reached out to Cincinnati, which is where one is located. And we formed really close bonds with Lucy and some of the doctors there. And then the new one is Rady. So that's been really cool to see that this is becoming more known. We need to figure out why and how to help these kids get the medical attention that they need. So, just the foundation alone making those connections for us. And that support group of moms going through the same that we are.
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself? Maybe something you didn't know before Jack was born.
On a very surface level, I can say that I always talk about this to some of my mom friends, and it's very embarrassing to actually say out loud. But I didn't know there were so many different varieties of syndromes and genetic mutations and conditions. So learning about Jack specifically was key to me. I could have very so
Mm.
easily just gone by whatever doctor was telling me to do. There was one doctor, one neonatologist in particular, that asked why I needed his diagnosis, why I was fighting for him to be diagnosed. And he said, I have a son with special needs, and I don't know why you would need this. State of Texas, you need it. So there are certain services now that we're eligible for to help Jack. And there was also a time period
Mm.
of figuring out how to mother and caregive that I didn't know I had in me. And I still find balance issues sometimes. Like maybe I take on a few extra appointments I could have waited on with Jack, right? But finding that balance and strength to not push for yourself, but push for your kiddo is something I didn't know I really had. I knew I was
Yeah.
a strong mom. I knew I was a mama bear already, but I didn't
Yeah.
know that I could be an advocate as well. And that was one of my bigger learning pieces to myself.
Mm.
So it's two part. I didn't know that this could happen. And then I didn't know that I could be the person to stand behind a child so complex.
Mm. Wow. I feel like you are the perfect person for new parents who are diagnosed with any, genetic condition or whether it's charge or something else. If,
Mhm.
you have their eyes and their ears and their attention right now, what do you want them to know about now that you can reflect on when these doctors say something to you that may not sit right, like now that you've reflected on? How do you want them to respond, or how do you want them to um, be present in the moment?
So one of the ways that I always kind of share with new parents to start is by looking up your syndrome. And it is scary, it can be intimidating, but having that piece alone, doing that one step first is always best. If there is a foundation or a support group, joining there, because these parents with real experiences will help you so much more than Dr. Google or just looking something up on its own. With Jack, he is so complex in all of his system. It's not just one area of his body that's affected or hindered. And knowing what we could do to help him and to long term help him was key. So, one of the things that I really struggled with in the NICU was that no one was outright sharing that he had Charge syndrome after we pushed them to do the test. And then when we got the results back, no one sat down and talked about it with me. It was them handing over a piece of paper, a packet with pages that Jack had been diagnosed with Charge syndrome, but there was no information, there was no help. And so, really, my only step next was going to these groups and finding children like him, finding real families to balance my life off of. And I remember I took the time to write this one mom in particular a note because I looked at her son and I was like, that could be Jack. Like he had blue eyes, blonde hair, and I was like, that could be Jack. And
Yeah.
I just sent his mom probably the most desperate message ever. But when you're in that state of anxiety and stress and
Yeah.
just trying to survive, that's all you can sometimes get out. And so reaching out to these other parents really helped me. And I think it would really help any new parent in this position.
I think you're so right. And we can put so much hope and faith in the medical and healthcare system, right? That the doctors are going
Yeah.
to always have the answer. You probably need to share that same amount of hope and faith with the support group or with the parents in your network or reaching out on
Yes.
a DM. Like so many of these conversations I hear on the podcast and I've seen firsthand are just you slide into someone's DMs and you say, I'm sitting here. This is happening to me. Can you share your experience? Like, can I follow your page? And what I love about social media too is it's pretty passive. It doesn't require a lot of like you, Taylor, to have to like energy to have to look at it. You can kind of
Yeah.
digest it how you want to. You can go through it when you need to, take a break when you need to, but it really gets
Yes.
to be on your terms.
Yes. That's why I value social media with this because the first thing I
Yeah.
did, right? I Googled the syndrome, then I went on and I hashtagged Charge syndrome or
Yes.
CHD7 mutation. And that's how I found my people, my support group.
Mhm. That's one of the first things I say is go to the hashtag section,
Yeah.
type in whatever it is that you're looking for.
Be
And
real children.
right, right. Well, you also wrote to me how much the Charge Syndrome Foundation meant to you at the beginning. Would you share some of
Yeah.
those resources for people to be aware of?
Yeah. So the foundation as a whole is there's only one. I don't know how to explain it other than oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about that. I don't know how to explain it other than that, but we have a great foundation. They work to, put on a conference every couple of years. They support families seeking medical needs and attention in other hospitals, one of those being Cincinnati. They help with diagnostics. So, once you get that diagnosis, you can go straight to the page, and there is a form that helps you know and what to look for in these charge kiddos because so many things get overlooked until it's in a more dire situation. There's always someone that's willing to talk to you through the foundation. There are support groups set up through our foundation for different age groups. So there's one, I think it's like 0 to 3. And then there's a couple other ones. I haven't gotten to the other ones yet just because we're still under that age 3, but they definitely do cater to the parents. They go through topic and they take votes on what topics should be covered next. And it's really been a good place and tipping point for us to seek support when we didn't feel like we had family and friends that understood us. And that was huge for us. So it's also helped us in medical settings know what to look for next. And people sometimes laugh at that, but we walk into his cardiac office, right? And we're talking about surgery. And it's like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, then we should probably branch all these on because he's an anesthesia risk. And it's like, well, do you know he's an anesthesia risk? And it's like, yes, we do. And, so it's been kind of fitting in ways like that too.
Wow. Yeah. You have to always be on your A game when you walk into the medical setting. It's not a choice for you because you are his historian.
Yes.
There's another podcast. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I take that piece on. Beginning, my husband and I tried to balance pieces. I was actually working full time at the time, and it was too much because we were crossing over and overlapping, and it made more sense for us to find what we were both good at. And I was good at balancing the medical side of it and balancing appointments and therapies and finding new therapists and finding new systems. And that's really been my sweet spot.
Well, if other families want to follow along with you on social media, where can they do that?
I mean, I love TikTok for the boredom, but I also post a lot of videos of Jack on TikTok. And then Instagram's always a fun one. I'm not as active on Facebook, but I feel like everyone's had a Facebook for 15 years or so now.
I think we're moving on. We're moving on. And I would say TikTok is the fun one, right? Instagram, I get a lot of connection and I learn a lot. And TikTok is where you go to have a good time.
Yes, we enjoy TikTok and Instagram.
Oh, well, I'm so grateful to you. And I'm so lucky that you live in Texas close by. So we will meet one of these days for sure.
Yes, we will.
Are there any other stories or parts of Jack's story or about Charge syndrome that you are really hoping people can become aware of or that you wanted to share?
I mean, I feel like there's days and days that I could talk about Jack. I just think, one of the things that I found most rewarding about Charge syndrome was learning that we don't know what these kids are capable of until they show us. And that has shown time and time again with Jack. We were told he may never walk, he may never talk, that he was deaf, that he was blind, that that we had all these barriers against us. And Jack has shown us time and time again that he is a capable child, that he is wanting to learn, that he is wanting to put his feet forward and walk. And it has been a joy in the chaos to learn that piece about not only Jack, but all these kiddos that have Charge syndrome. And I've loved being a part of that community that sees that and gets to be a part of that.
Well, you said it about Charlie too, and I can see in Jack that they get this fire from you, and
I think it's me,
I mean, they get this you've shown up and you're here and you're speaking and you're talking about it, and it's not easy, and you're having to revisit things that you wish you didn't have to remember and go through, but you're showing up and you're doing it and you're making a difference, and I see that in both of your kids from what you've described of them.
Yeah, my husband likes to let me know often that the kids are me and not him.
I'll have to get them all together, and then you can do the voice challenge because you said you were a loud talker. So we'll see who matches your voice.
Well, it's a funny story. So we have a speech therapist that's worked for us for I think she's worked with us for about 1.5 years now. And Jack is profound hearing loss. So he is deaf. And she was always amazed because he's found a way to adapt through that. And he doesn't even like to wear his hearing devices. But one day, I remember she came in and she goes, well, I think it probably also helps that you and your daughter are really loud in speaking. And she didn't mean anything. And I just started laughing. She did not mean anything ill about it, right? It was not said maliciously or anything like that.
But
it was just so funny because she was like, it helps. And Jack now, we take him anywhere and he's just the loudest child. And, talking. So that has been, a really cool thing to watch.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about you, about Jack and Charlie and your family. And I'm so grateful to have met you. And I can't wait to meet you in real life for coffee in Wimberley soon.
Yes, let's do it.
Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists, parents. We've got a starter kit for you, and clinicians. We even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.